HighBridge, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Great Spiritual Migration, How the World's Largest Religion is Seeking a Better Way to be Christian, by Brian McLaren, read by Brian McLaren. This book is dedicated to my colleagues in three wonderful organizations: Convergence, the Auburn Senior Fellows Program, and the Wild Goose Festival. They are pioneers in the great spiritual migration. Preface. Swallow-tailed kite. The human story is a tale of people in motion. Anthropologists tell us that our ancient ancestors lived in southern Africa some 200,000 years ago, but it didn't take long before many began migrating north, eventually crossing into the Middle East. Some then migrated west across Europe, and others moved east across Asia, and that we know was just the beginning. The Bible also tells a story of humans on the move, tracing the human journey from life as hunter-gatherers in a garden, to nomadic pastoralists with their patriarchs, to settled agriculturalists with tribal chiefs and warlords. From there, human beings transition to life in city-states, and from there, we become uneasy citizens of jostling kingdoms and colonizing empires. Exodus and exile, two of the main storylines of the Hebrew Scriptures, are tales of a people in motion, and the biblical plotline seethes with a deeply human tension between settling down and moving on. Jesus himself was perpetually in motion, leading his disciples from town to town, their physical movements mirroring the spiritual odyssey on which he led them. Foxes have holes and birds of the air have nests, he said, but he had no such home. He was always on the move, never settling down anywhere for long. His first words were, "Follow me," and his final words were, "Go into all the world." Jesus, we might say, was a migrant Messiah, and the Bible is a book of migrations. As a boy, I was an avid reader of the Bible, and this sense of movement was deeply embedded in me. Then, as a teenager, I began reading science fiction, and my adolescent imagination was soon expanding with grand dreams of traveling among the stars. It's no wonder that Homo sapiens has also been called Homo viator. We are human wayfarers and pilgrims, always on the move. Well, maybe not always. I grew up in a fundamentalist Christian tradition called the Plymouth Brethren. We didn't have an official motto, but if we did, it might have been, "We shall not be moved." We contributed to the larger Christian community several of Christianity's worst ideas, including dispensationalism and the rapture and the whole left behind last days scenario. You're welcome. Our little sect was made slightly famous by the great American humorist Garrison Keillor. His stories about his childhood and the sanctified brethren often elicit from me a chuckle of familiarity and sometimes a wince or groan. My paternal and maternal grandparents were dedicated members of the Brethren, missionaries and elders, true loyalists. As a faithful firstborn son, I was predisposed to join their ranks as a good Brethren boy, to stay put and play by the rules. But by my teenage years, it was clear that I simply didn't fit in the rigid Brethren box. My love of philosophy, evolution, and rock and roll were three spiritual strikes that counted me out. Providentially for me, the Jesus movement came along in those years, and my experience in that movement made it possible for me to stay Christian, but in a new way, no longer as a fundamentalist, but as an evangelical. Although evangelicals are seen by many as arch-conservatives, folks like me who were born fundamentalists often experience evangelicalism as a big step into more freedom. Scratch an evangelical, you might say, and underneath the paint you'll find a fundamentalist seeking a little room to grow. As a young, non-denominational evangelical in my 30s, I became a church planter and pastor and felt very much at home. I had already come a long way, and I wasn't going anywhere. But just as I was settling down, politically ambitious fundamentalists staged a decisive takeover of evangelicalism in the United States, putting it firmly into the orbit of the religious right and reclaiming it as a camouflaged form of fundamentalism. As a result, by the age of 40, I found that I had moved to the progressive margin of the evangelical camp. I began writing books from that vantage point, but I quickly learned that zealous conservative gatekeepers were eager to purge anyone to their theological or cultural left, so my location, even in evangelicalism, grew more tenuous. Whether I emigrated or was deported is a question up for debate, but one way or the other, by 50, I found myself on the move again. Over the last 10 years, something has changed for me. I haven't simply moved to a new location where I'm now settling down from, say, static fundamentalism to static evangelicalism to static liberalism. Instead, I've come to see that what matters most is not our status, but our trajectory, not where we are, but where we're going, not where we stand, but where we're headed. Christian faith, for me, is no longer a static location, but a great spiritual journey, and that changes everything. As I see it, religion is at its best when it leads us forward, when it guides us in our spiritual growth as individuals and in our cultural evolution as a species. Unfortunately, religion often becomes more of a cage than a guide, holding us back rather than summoning us onward, a buffer to constructive change rather than a catalyst of it. In times of rapid and ambiguous change, such a regressive turn in religion may be understandable, but it is even more tragic. When a culture needs wise spiritual guidance the most, all it gets from religious leaders is anxious condemnation and critique, along with a big dose of nostalgia for the lost golden age of the good old days. We see this regressive pull in many sectors of Christianity, along with sectors of Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, Judaism, and other religions too. In that light, it's no surprise that people by the millions are moving away from traditional religions entirely, often into secularism, often into experimental forms of spirituality that are not yet supported by religious traditions. But at this pivotal moment, something else is happening. Within each tradition, unsettling but needed voices are arising. Prophetic voices, we might call them. Voices of change, hope, imagination, and new beginnings. They say there's an alternative to static or rigid religion on the one hand, and religion-free secularism on the other. They claim that the Spirit is calling us not to dig in our heels, but rather to pack up our tents and get moving again. They invite us on a great spiritual migration, not out of our religions, but out of our cages and ruts, not as jaded ex-members, but as hopeful pilgrims moving forward in the journey of faith. It took me almost 5 decades to understand that the call to Christian discipleship is a call to get going, to move forward. That's why I've written this book. This isn't just a report of what's going on, it's an invitation for you to get involved, to come along, to help create a better future for our faith and for our world. Since childhood, I've been interested in birds. As a little boy in upstate New York, I was taught by my mother to notice the arrival of the robins as an early sign of spring. I have a primal childhood memory of walking along a trail in a meadow and noticing a sparrow sitting on a fence post, singing a song I had never heard a sparrow sing before. 3 high notes, followed by a liquid trill. I begged my mom to take me to the library, where I scoured books until I could identify what I had heard, a song sparrow, and my lifelong love for birds had begun. I spent most of my life in Maryland, and by the time I moved away, I could identify nearly every bird I encountered by both sight and song. For about 7 years, I've lived along the Gulf Coast in Florida, and I'm getting acquainted with a whole new array of bird species. Now, the harbinger of spring is not the robin, but the swallow-tailed kite that flies in from South America in February and March. Any day now, I will again see it. Sleek white body, black wing bars, black forked tail, diving and gliding, soaring and hovering with perfect grace just over the treetops. And I will again be moved by the wonder of migration, written not only into the human heart, but into all of creation. What must it be like to be a young bird happily spending winter or summer in some comfortable location, and then suddenly to feel the irresistible summons to migrate? I don't know what it feels like to be a bird, but I do know what it feels like to be a human being who feels the call to rise and move. I think you do too. Although I'm writing as a Christian, primarily for my fellow Christians, I would hope that people of other faiths could learn lessons from our experience that are applicable to their own, just as we will learn from theirs. Like flocks of geese migrating in our distinct V's from different starting points, I believe we will discover that we are being called in the same direction, and if we heed that call, we will discover one another in new ways. I would even dare to hope that many who have left Christian faith, often for very good reasons, will find in these pages even better reasons for hope, along with an invitation to re-engage, to join in this epic project, this transforming quest, this great spiritual migration toward a better way of being Christian and a better way of being human. Introduction. Coke and the can. Imagine that you just bought a 12-pack of Coke. Each virgin can sits before you, bubbling with a promise of caffeinated, carbonated, carbohydrate-rich pleasure. You remove the first can from the cardboard box and pop it open. Fizz. You lift the can to your lips, but the liquid tastes salty and foul. Shocked, you throw it away and open the second can. You take a sip and immediately spit it out. It tastes like spoiled milk. You open a third can and lift it cautiously to your lips, but don't drink. The smell of carbonated sewage disgusts you. If the fourth and fifth cans greet you with the scent of gasoline and vinegar, how likely is it that you'll open the sixth through 12th cans, each of which has the classic sweet, velvety, tongue-tingling taste you were expecting? Now imagine you call Coca-Cola customer service and share with them your experience. Customer service. Coca-Cola World Headquarters, how may I help you? You. I just bought a 12-pack of Coke that tasted terrible. Customer service. I'm sorry to hear that. What color were the cans? You. The cans were normal, bright red with white lettering. Customer service. Well, that's the most important thing. Was the cardboard box sound, the box that contained the 12 cans? You. Yes, the cardboard box was fine. It was the taste that was the problem. Customer service. Thanks for calling. I'm glad the cans were red and the box was sturdy. Enjoy Coke and have a nice day. A brand like Coke only has meaning because it is linked to an essential quality or qualities for a soft drink. Taste, not the can. With a politician, policies, effectiveness, and character count, not hairstyle or skin color. With a bicycle, speed, weight, and comfort are paramount, but not saddle color. And what are the qualities of Christian faith that really matter, regardless of the packaging? Therein lies the trouble. Therein lies our need for migration. For centuries, Christianity has been presented as a system of beliefs. That system of beliefs has supported a wide range of unintended consequences, from colonialism to environmental destruction, subordination of women to stigmatization of LGBT people, anti-Semitism to Islamophobia, clergy pedophilia to white privilege. What would it mean for Christians to rediscover their faith, not as a problematic system of beliefs, but as a just and generous way of life, rooted in contemplation and expressed in compassion, that makes amends for its mistakes and is dedicated to beloved community for all? Could Christians migrate from defining their faith as a system of beliefs to expressing it as a loving way of life? Could Christian faith lose the bitter taste of colonialism, exclusion, judgment, hypocrisy, and oppression, and regain the sweet and nourishing flavor of justice, joy, and peace? For centuries, Christians have presented God as a supreme being who showers blessings upon insiders who share certain beliefs and proper institutional affiliation, but who punishes outsiders with eternal conscious torment. Yet Jesus revealed God as one who eats with sinners, welcomes outsiders in, and forgives even while being rejected, tortured, and killed. Jesus associated God more with gracious parental tenderness than strict authoritarian toughness. He preached that God was to be found in self-giving service rather than self-asserting domination. What would it mean for Christians to let Jesus and his message lead them to a new vision of God? What would it mean for Christians to understand, experience, and embody God as the loving, healing, reconciling Spirit in whom all creatures live, move, and have their being? For centuries, Christianity has presented itself as an organized religion, a change-averse institution or set of institutions that protects and promotes a timeless system of beliefs that were handed down fully formed in the past. Yet, Christianity's actual history is a story of change and adaptation. We Christians have repeatedly adapted our message, methods, and mission to the contours of our time. What might happen if we understand the core Christian ethos as creative, constructive, and forward-leaning, as an organizing religion that challenges all institutions, including its own, to learn, grow, and mature toward a deepening, enduring vision of reconciliation with God, self, neighbor, enemy, and creation? A shared frustration. Today, millions of us, Catholics, evangelicals, mainline Protestants, and Orthodox Christians, share something that we seldom verbalize. We're worried that the brand of Christianity has been so compromised that many of us are barely able to use the label anymore. Whether we lean conservative, progressive, or moderate, whether we're clergy or lay people, old or young, more and more of us feel that there must be a better way to be Christian. We all love Jesus. To us, he's the best thing about Christianity. We all think he was right, and we all want to follow the way of life he modeled and taught. We all believe there are many wonderful and unique treasures in our Christian faith, but we are coming to realize that many sectors of our Christian faith need something more radical than renewal, revival, or even reform. We need migration. Of course, we all know many people who are happily Christian in the conventional sense, their only complaint being that people like us won't leave them alone to their relative bliss in the spiritual status quo. But we also know that for a lot of people, Christianity is malfunctioning, seriously so, and it's not pretty. I've traveled to more than 40 countries in the last 20 years, interacting with people from dozens of denominations, and everywhere I turn, I hear alarming reports. A Latin American Pentecostal pastor tells me his experience of Christianity from the inside has led him out of faith and into atheism. He no longer believes what he preaches and feels like a fraud, but has no other way to support his family. A young mom in the United States laments that she can't bring her kids to church for fear that Christianity will instill the same sense of inferiority and shame in them that it did in her. An African Christian college student tells me that prosperity gospel preachers in his country have turned Christianity into a financial scam, a form of theft, religious organized crime, he called it, enriching pastors at the expense of parishioners. An Asian Catholic activist tells me that he hasn't attended Mass in decades because it feels like a way of pacifying victims of injustice rather than organizing and empowering them as protagonists in their own liberation. A European pastor tells me that he thinks it is already too late. The best thing that can happen is for the Christian religion to collapse under its own weight so something new can arise from the rubble. He sees himself as doing hospice work for his religion. These stories of frustration, turmoil, and discouragement can break your heart. We've all seen the statistics. Nearly all sectors of Christian faith in the West are experiencing numerical decline, especially among their younger generations. Some of our colleagues comfort themselves in the face of these downward trends. The half-hearted and superficial are dropping out, they say, so only the true believers like us remain. More of us, however, are beginning to realize that a sea change is underway, and the causes of decline go deeper than supposed spiritual flaws in those who've left. To make matters worse, it seems like every day some of our fellow Christians are reaching new lows in making Christian faith look ugly, dull, ridiculous, dangerous, or dim-witted. And each of us, of course, has made his or her own contributions in this category. It's not just us Christians who feel this way about our faith. Jews, Muslims, and others are coming to the same conclusion. Our religions often stand for the very opposite of what our founders stood for. The pattern is predictable. Founders are typically generous, visionary, bold, and creative. But the religions that ostensibly carry on their work often become the opposite: constricted, change-averse, nostalgic, fearful, obsessed with boundary maintenance, turf battles, and money. Instead of greeting the world with open arms, as their founders did, their successors stand guard with clenched fists. Instead of empowering others as their founders did, they hoard power. Instead of defying tradition and unleashing moral imagination as their founders did, they impose tradition and refuse to think outside the lines. A religion that cuts itself off from the example of its founder while still bearing the founder's name often becomes little more than a chaplaincy to other ideologies, offering its services to the highest bidder. No wonder so many religious folks today wear down, burn out, and opt out. Jesus kidnapped. And no wonder more and more of us who are Christians by birth, by choice, or both, find ourselves shaking our heads and asking, what happened to Christianity? What happened to Jesus and his beautiful message? We feel as if our founder has been kidnapped and held hostage by extremists. His captors parade him in front of cameras to say under duress things he obviously doesn't believe. As their blank-faced puppet, he often comes across as anti-poor, anti-environment, anti-gay, anti-intellectual, anti-immigrant, and anti-science, not to mention pro-torture, pro-inequality, pro-violence, pro-death penalty, and pro-war. That's not the Jesus we met in the Gospels. That's not the Jesus who won our hearts. Meanwhile, we notice a sizable minority of Christians who quietly but firmly resist this ideological project. Too often, though, this minority can only speak convincingly about what they're against and what they no longer believe. They struggle to define in positive terms what faith means for them after it has been scrubbed of overconfident myth, superstition, and ideology. If their counterparts seem angry and closed, these folks often seem smart but lost. Preoccupied with formalities, committees, and tradition, they remain strangely silent about spiritual experience. If their counterparts check their minds at the front door of the church, these folks sometimes seem to have checked their hearts. People like you and me feel we are offered endless pairs of unacceptable alternatives: ignorance on fire or intelligence on ice, excessive certainty or insufficient confidence, updated styles and structures with an outdated message, or an updated message with outdated styles and structures, a regressive movement or a progressive bureaucracy. Again and again, we are offered two ways of being irrelevant. Neither option works long term, neither compels, and neither offers a good way to live. For many of us, this tension has been building for decades. I seriously considered dropping out of the pastorate and even the faith on several occasions. At those junctures, I imagined that I would continue to love Jesus, what he stood for, what he taught, and how he lived, but I would slip out of the back door of the religion and no longer wear the Christian t-shirt. The discredited brand just didn't seem worth the stress and hassle anymore. You could call me spiritual but not religious. You could call me post-evangelical or even post-Christian. You could call me whatever you want. But I was tired of bailing out a ship that seemed full of leaks and whose captains seemed intent on steering straight into yesterday's sunset. I was ready to swim for shore, but there was one problem. Whenever I quieted my heart, never once did I hear the Spirit whispering, "Give up, turn back, drop out." Instead, again and again, I heard, "Go farther, don't be afraid, hang in there, go forward." So I strove to do so, and the titles of my books tell the story of a restlessness, a quest, a spiritual journey or migration. Can Christianity be saved? A lot of us have heard a lot of sermons about the need for sinners to be saved, born again, or converted. Now we're daring to wonder, can Christianity experience for itself the things it has preached for others? Can Christianity be saved? Can Christian faith be born anew? I know some of you aren't sure, but I'll bet you at least hope the answer is yes. Those of us who have been on this spiritual migration for many years often forget that each day there's another 14-year-old coming of age and asking questions for the first time, afraid she's the only one, afraid she'll be kicked out of her church and even her family for questioning what she was taught. Across town from her, there's a pastor whose inherited theological high heels have gone way beyond causing blisters to making it hard to take another step. And not far from her, there's an old grandfather whose kids and grandkids are far from God and far from the church, and he's having second thoughts about the whole thing himself. And just down the street, there's a young mother putting her kids to bed at night, wishing she could teach them to pray and maybe tell them a Bible story, but not wanting to infect them with the shame, fear, and guilt that her religious upbringing instilled in her. It is tempting to leave Christian faith altogether, I know. But there's a treasure hidden in its field, and I want to assure you that you have permission to shovel away the distractions and rediscover the precious gift that has for too long been buried. That's my good news. You don't have to give up on Christian faith, nor do you have to accept it as it is. Christian faith can be saved, and you are invited to participate in its conversion. If just a dozen of us here and a handful of us there begin migrating in the right direction, that's enough to start something. Changing hearts, moving together, soon the center of gravity shifts, and soon a migration is underway. What are we moving toward? My most direct answer would be that we are migrating toward a profound conversion in Christian faith. We
Sample complete. Ready to continue?